Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. As you know, the future of work is changing. And now, more than ever, is a time we evaluate the way we lead to prepare ourselves for it. This is why we bring you a series that showcases a plethora of leaders who have inspired us by redefining the way they lead. Join me, Lakshmi Praturi, on this journey as I take a deep dive into the lives of these trailblazers and their unique take on leadership. This month, our theme is sustainability, and we are truly fortunate to have Dr. Arunabha Ghosh join us. He's the founder and CEO of Council on Energy, Environment, and Water since 2010 and has led CEEW to the top ranks as one of Asia's leading policy research institutions and among the world's 20 best climate think tanks. He has been involved in the design of the International Solar Alliance and is the founding board member of Clean Energy Access Network. He's the co-author, editor of 4 books with experience in 45 countries. He previously worked at Princeton, Oxford, UNDP, New York, and WTO in Geneva. In 2018, Dr. Ghosh was nominated to the UN's Committee for Development Policy. In 2020, the government of India appointed him co-chair of the Energy, Environment, and Climate Change track for India's forthcoming Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy. His 2019 TED Talk on air quality has over 245,000 views. He's the co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Clean Air, and is a member of the International High-Level Panel on Environment of Peace and Initiative. As you can see, he's someone that has traversed national and international boundaries and is full of knowledge about the future of energy and future of work. With that, I would like to invite Dr. Arunabha Ghosh to join us. Hi, Arunabha.
Hi, Lakshmi. Very nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on your show.
Sure, you have one of the most favorite backgrounds I have, which is lots of books. And,
Sanctuary.
Yeah, I always joke that I can go to any shop and walk out without buying something, but a bookshop is very difficult to walk out without buying something.
That's right.
So, Arunabha, I want to just talk a little bit about your interest in sustainability. They say that often children are the basis for a sustainable world. So, as a subject, has this interested you since you were a child? Where did it start?
Well, as a child, I was always interested in things happening around me. I was affected by, in some ways, societal violence, riots, etc., that would happen in the 1980s. I was affected by political developments happening, coalition governments emerging in India. I was just about a teenager when our economic reforms began, so I got impacted, or I started thinking about what is this? Why are we shipping our gold to other countries? And then, when the Rio conference on sustainable development happened way back in 1992, I was still in school. And that's when it kind of struck me, what is this thing about climate change? But this wasn't going to be what I intended to work on. I trained myself as an economist originally, and then a political scientist. And my early career was focused on things we are still talking about: access to medicines, intellectual property, farmers' rights, that kind of stuff. And then I did work on violent conflict and how that impacts development. I looked at natural resources and the way they influence intra and inter-country conflict. So I came to the sustainability world much later in that kind of narrowly defined way. But if you think of sustainability as the environment, but also the politics, also the economics and society, then yes, all those childhood influences have made me who I am.
Yeah. And since 2010, you have led the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water, and it's become one of the top-ranking institutions in South Asia. So, what do you think is that led to the incubation, and then what did you do later on that really got its significance?
I think at CW we like to keep asking ourselves, what is it that we're disrupting? Because there's no point being in public policy if you're going to do the straight and narrow. Um, so the first disruption that we had at CW was the creation of CW. And what I mean by that is I was determined to create a platform that would be independent. There are many institutions and think tanks in the country that did excellent work, but just the way our governance was structured, etc., one way or the other, they were reliant on government funding. And I wanted to create an independent think tank that could do independent analysis and then reach out to government. And that was, in a way, the first of its kind, at least in the sustainability space in India. And the other disruption was to focus on public policy through the eyes of the young, not through the eyes of the old. And if you actually look at think tanks, generally they get populated by people very advanced in their careers, or maybe having finished their formal government or political jobs and then leading up think tanks. And if you look at the demography of India, if 60% of your population is under the age of 25, um, then it's that demographic category that is to think about building careers in public policy and then influence their own future rather than have someone else influence it. So these were two key disruptions when we set out. But then there were other sort of inflection points when in 2014 we were called by the government to advise on how big our renewable energy targets could get. And we went from less than 2,000 megawatts of renewables at that time to a target of 175,000 megawatts. A lot on the back of the analysis that CW did. Then in 2015-16, this kind of fundamental central role that we played in facilitating the Paris Agreement, in facilitating the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, in facilitating the International Aviation Agreement, but most importantly, creating the International Solar Alliance, the world's newest intergovernmental entity, now with more than 95 signatories. And then finally, towards the end of the decade, I would say the inflection points came around the disruption in markets, where we started up a Center for Energy Finance to try and see what kind of financial solutions could draw in billions of dollars into more sustainable infrastructure. Or we created something called Powering Livelihoods to start investing in startups in rural India using clean distributed energy for running productive enterprises, small textile units, food processing centers, milk chilling centers, agricultural pumps. So that's a $50 billion opportunity that you notice, and so let's incubate these markets. So these have been different sorts of inflection points, but at each stage, the question has always been, what are we disrupting?
And the interesting thing is, I'm glad you talked about youth, and you're absolutely right. I think a lot of think tanks are for thinking but not implementing. It's great that you bridged that gap. And also in your TED Talk, you talked about how we as citizens, we can create a democratic demand for clean air. Mm-hmm. What are some steps you think either leaders of organizations or we individuals can take to make this happen?
See, Lakshmi, the odd thing is that we lead a schizophrenic life every single day. On one hand, as a citizen, we complain about air quality.
Right.
And as the same citizen, when she acts as an economic agent, whether you're the leader of an organization or the worker in an organization or, a laborer, we forget our actions as economic agents impact our quality of life as citizens. It's the same human being. So to create a democratic demand for clean air, as sort of organizational leaders, we have to put ourselves simultaneously in the role of the economic agent and the citizen. So we have to inform ourselves and our community, and our community includes our staff, our vendors, our interlocutors, etc. And very critically, count the loss. What is the economic loss to my business for there not being cleaner air, right? What is the kind of talent and investment I am not getting for my business because the air outside is bad and people don't want to come and live and work in Delhi, or don't want to work in Kanpur and so forth. We have to become active monitors. One of the things we are doing in UP is using our own kind of network of low-cost sensors and developing a software to use that sensor-based advanced warning. You don't have to wait for the government to be able to do that, but that helps you identify the hotspots, where exactly, when you see the smoke, you know why it is happening. As leaders of organizations, we have to pay a price. We have to invest in the technologies that, at least in our areas of operation, are the cleaner technologies. Say fleet services for IT industries. Please stop using diesel cars. You're ferrying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the country all the time. Please use cleaner vehicles for your fleet services and pay the price for it. And then finally think about your own sort of workplace practices inside the offices, etc., which on a continuous basis, reminds you and your colleagues, what it means. The way, if you don't manage garbage well within your office, why would you think it's going to be managed better outside of your office? So it's really that kind of breaking that schizophrenia of citizen at night but economic agent at day. And if we can bridge that those two, I think we can really transform the way we demand clean air.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're right that it's not just about someone coming and doing something for me, questioning what am I doing at every step of the way, and every little bit of change of behavior helps. And I want to go back a little bit to what you said of how you set up your organization itself. And that also talks about organizational sustainability in a very different way. You said that you didn't want to wait for government funding or a government to start. You really wanted this to be an independent think tank.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sustain it? Is it through corporate grants? Is it because of research work that you do? Is it subscription? Because it's amazing that you built a world-class organization that is built like a private company, So tell us a little bit about that.
So, this last statement that you made, I wouldn't call it private company or public company or non-profit.
Yeah, it's
But you're absolutely, you've touched on something very, very core to our heart, which is we wanted to create a professional environment.
You're right.
And I've always told my colleagues, I even penned a poem for them. I call it, sacrifice to desire. Why is the non-profit sector considered as something that you have to sacrifice? Why can't it become a vocation of desire? That, if I want to have impact at scale, I don't want to impact 20 villages. I want to impact 200,000 villages, right?
Yeah.
Then you begin to see that the nonprofit sector as well, the public policy sector as well, can be something that is attractive enough to build a career, not just spend 2 years, write a nice statement of purpose and move into a business school, because then you will get a real job according to your parents. Now, to do that, the work, of course, has to be good and valuable, but your work environment also has to be something that's professional. And in order to do that, we've been sort of uncompromising in, the pays that we offer. I mean, you have to struggle, you have to fight with your donors and your supporters that, no, we want to pay the best rates to attract the best. So we get funding from philanthropic foundations, we get funding from international organizations, we get funding from corporates, etc. But what we don't do is private consultancy. So everything we do is out in the public domain.
Of course.
And we follow a rule, very strict rule. The funder and the client will always be separate. And that means the client cannot tell us what good news to write, and the funder cannot direct us, what kind of methodology we are using. And because we have done this consistently without compromise every single time, that what was originally considered as a crazy business model, right? Already you're trying to set up something in the non-profit space, and then you're not going to the people who have the money. You say, no, I don't want your money. I'm going to go to somewhere else, and I'm going to convince them to give me money to help you solve your problems. Um, we've now demonstrated that that business model can succeed. So that's really the way we've gone about it. But it requires that uncompromising, boring consistency of
Yeah.
sticking to your values.
Yeah. No, I really want to underscore two things that you said. The last thing you said in terms of you got to be consistent. You make one exception and that's it. So you have to be really, really consistent. And the other thing is really about, um, separating this separation of church and state kind of a thing of the funder doesn't get to determine what the outcome is, kind of a thing. It truly is a philanthropic model that you give, you believe in the system, and you leave it alone. And it's and the other thing I really want to say is, I worked in the nonprofit sector for a long time, and the thing I would always fight is, why do we always want to keep our overhead low in nonprofit? Why do we say that we should pay the least to people, we should sit in the smallest of offices? If you go to a for-profit company, you never question them what percent is your salaries or anything. If the outcome is good, people should be paid well. Why should you want them to make you the best people to make the biggest sacrifices to come to nonprofit? So I really want to underscore that and say that's really, really an important thing that you said. Is a nonprofit is just happens to be a way of the organization being structured. It makes no difference in the professionalism of the organization. So I really want to thank you for.
I joke with my colleagues. I say we are not for profit, but we're also not for loss. So we've
exactly,
got to cover our costs, and we've got to cover costs which are which attract the best and the brightest.
Absolutely. And talking about the best and the brightest, maybe can we elaborate a little bit on challenges that restrict women from entering the sustainability workforce? Because one of the things we've been looking a lot is, in general, women in professional roles, and especially in the sustainability area. Do you feel there is a shortage, and what kind of initiatives are you taking to counter this?
So this is something very close to my heart. We started something called Women in Sustainability about 4.5 years ago at CEEW, and then formally about 4 years ago, publicly. And here's the challenge. Number one is that you have about 50%, balance in women and men ratios in pursuing sustainability-related courses or public policy courses, etc. And you have kind of similar balance when people are entering that workforce. But because of the prior condition I was talking about earlier, that you're not getting paid well, etc., etc., there is anyway a lot of people who tend to drop off, right? Both men and women. But then comes in the women-specific or gender-specific challenges. Number one is metrics of what is good enough, and we have to truly introspect when we say, this is not technical enough, and those kind of like loose words that we use, or she did not manage to build up that network, whereas you've struggled with the same thing, but that is just par for course, it's a challenge you're facing, but no, that wasn't, she didn't really have the leadership skills. So those metrics themselves are extremely fuzzy. But then it gets a little bit more complicated. I call it the 5 horsemen of public policy, sort of taking a stab at that kind of biblical phrasing. The first, and then you will realize why things get much more complicated. First horseman, ageism. So you want young women and young men to join public policy. Already the odds are stacked against you. The odds are even more stacked. A woman will say, "Acha baby, haan, ruk jao, wait a second, then we'll tell." Right? That's combined with sexism. right? That's combined with, and this is extremely close to my heart, classism. We don't want the privileged women to be, entering the public policy workforce, and that as a check the box that we've got women in the workforce, right? We want, at CEEW, have women who were the first engineers from their families, women who've, come from rural areas, women who've come from extremely small, districts, etc. Unless we break the classist barriers that we have in the service sector, including in public policy, you will have think tanks populated by the privileged. Then comes nepotism and men scratching men's backs, right? Or the privileged scratching each other's backs. And then comes plagiarism. So these five horsemen of public policy make it fundamentally difficult. So what I would say is we need to actively invest in creating women leaders, not just women workers, right? And that requires, people management, that requires ability to train them to manage scale and manage change. So when you're able to demonstrate that you've created women leaders who can manage people, manage scale, manage change, then you say, well, yes, we'll just go with what is working. So we've got to go to the heart of these kind of discriminations. It's not enough just to say, women are discriminated. The underlying that is many more layers of challenges that we have to start confronting.
I can't agree with you more. This is a subject very, very close to my heart also about, women leaders. Now, talking about leadership, what is there a quote, a mantra, or a favorite leader that you have that keeps you going?
Well, the one thing I've always said to my colleagues right from the beginning is if you want to be revolutionary, you have to take ownership. No big dream, small dream happens without execution, and you can't rely on someone else to execute. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. No, I think I love it. It's like the personal responsibility and the ownership you need to take.
Yeah.
Now, talking about responsibility, etc., it comes with some successes, some failures. So, what are some lessons that failure has taught you?
Again, something I've told many of my young colleagues many times over is you can't invent adversity. And we sometimes, we have this, some of us at least, we come from privilege, or things are going well, and this anxiety sets in, do I even deserve this, etc. And then, so we start inventing failure in a way. You start inventing challenges and anxieties, etc. And the thing is, the pandemic year, for instance, has demonstrated that you can keep imagining bad situations and it'll get worse. So the thing about failure is to not equate it with hitting rock bottom, right? And if you just encountered failure for what it is in the moment and try and parse why that has happened and not make it existential about the entirety of your being, then we will stop swinging between sort of self-doubt on one hand and impatience for success on the other. And I see this pattern all the time, this constant oscillation between self-doubt and impatience. I'm not good enough. People are not valuing me enough. So that's one of the things. The other thing I would say is that this goes back to ownership, and related to ownership is commitment. There's this Harvard Business School professor, Elizabeth Moscanter. She wrote this book, Confidence, right? And one of the things she says, the difference between success and failure is how long people give it before they give up, right? And you don't know how long. You don't know how long you have to keep going because there is no finish line, right? So you have to decide those metrics for yourself. But at least till you've not met your own metric, you shouldn't be giving up, right? And that requires not just ownership, it requires commitment, right? And that is, again, something I see often, even in the brightest of minds. Sometimes it's flaking. And you have to be committed committed to what it is that you have set out to do. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So at least to me, these are two different ways in which you have perspective around the magnitude of the failure when actually maybe it's actually not that big. And the other is, even if you fail, how long you carry on.
Yeah. No, that's great. I always say that if you're up for something big, measure your movement every 10 years.
Mhm.
Don't measure it every, quarter.
Yes.
I think it's impossible to move things
Yes.
in year or two even. So here you are 10 years later, obviously look where your organization has come, right? And if you were put on a quarterly basis, it would have been very difficult to, to accomplish.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So now we come to the section which is Stump Me If You Can. You can ask me any questions you want, and you can have fun with it.
So I'm gonna jump straight into what we were discussing, right?
Yeah.
As I said, I am, passionate about having more women leaders. Now, you've been talking to leaders for many, many, many years, right? You tell me, what do we need to do to change an organizational culture so that you can have more women in leadership roles?
For me, I always feel to have great women leaders, women have to work on themselves first. As an organization, it is very important to maybe create a special forum or something where we teach women how to say just, I want.
Yeah.
I think this is the biggest problem I see is even women who are the most accomplished, most ready to take something on, the self-doubt is unimaginably disproportionate to the self-confidence of men. So I say before we look out, before we talk about glass ceiling, before we talk about anything, women should work on themselves and feel equally okay to leave their child with the husband to go on a business trip, equally good to leave the child in a daycare and go to work. And I think we need to work with women on their own mental framework before anything external. And that's what I talk to women all the time. And I say even things like, don't hurry into getting married. Your partner can make or break who you are. So take your time, every little thing, have the confidence. Because the society keeps telling you, oh, look how loudmouth she is. The same thing a man or a woman say. So don't care what others say, care about what you want a little bit. So that's the first thing. I feel the only thing we need to do is teach women to make themselves important.
Okay, I have one more maybe related question, but not just for women, from women and men, but let's take young women. Right?
Yeah.
And based on all the learnings you've had on leadership, how would you advise young leaders or young professionals wanting to be leaders as to how do they constantly innovate to be ahead of the game, to see over the horizon, so that they don't aspire to leadership positions, but they aspire to leadership actions?
Yes. Yeah. This is the other thing I always love telling young people is that, look, we all are going to live to be 90, whether we like it or not. It has changed. Yes. So you're in your 20s. So you're not going to retire at 60. Okay. Right. You're going to retire at 70 or 75 or something. So even if you're 30, okay, you're 45, 50 years at least of active working life, right? Yeah. So take chances, try different things. The society, again, what we've been taught is, okay, you finish, then you go to a management consulting job, then you go to a big company, then you start your own company. And then, there is a formula that's given to you. So I always say use the first 10 years of your career to understand who you are. What is your strength? Where can you really make a difference? And don't jump from one thing to the other. Take something, be there for 3 or 4 years. Because for the young people today, the biggest problem is instability. It's just they want to jump from one thing to the other. Oh, that guy is giving me, 10,000 rupees more. I just go there.
Yeah.
And I always say, no, first think of how can you contribute to the company. That should be your first thing. So my thing is, there are three things I tell young people. Number one, as I said, is try different jobs. Be in finance, be in marketing, be something. Do different things. Be in a for-profit, non-profit, different things. But give at least 3 years in each of them to understand yourself. Don't be in a hurry. That's the first thing. The second thing is always learn something that has nothing to do with your job. Being interdisciplinary is extremely important. I mean, if you are the logical type, go take a dance class. If you are the creative type, go take an accounting class. It doesn't matter. Interdisciplinary. Always go to places where you find people who are not like you, because otherwise we become an echo chamber. And especially as young leaders, you need to be exposed to as many things as possible. And the final thing is something that you touched upon about failure, is that, one of my favorite quotes is that if you've not been rejected at least 3 times every day, you are not trying hard enough. Don't take failure personally. And I see a lot of people, especially personal failures of, I didn't get the rank I wanted, or I didn't get the, I'm disappointed in love, or, all these kinds of things become like the end all and be all. And I say, trust me, in 5 years, you won't even remember this. No matter how deep the love is, in 5 years, you will not remember anything about it. So don't let an individual failure define who you are, and that's why I loved what you said about failure also, because especially for young people, they need to understand not one, not two, they will face thousands of rejections if they are going after what they want. And you just have to wear it lightly and have a lot of sense of humor. It's just, learn how to laugh at yourself and don't take yourself so seriously. In the big scheme of things in the universe, we are a speck of a speck of a speck of a speck of a speck, maybe in the pale blue dot. So don't take yourself so seriously. The world doesn't depend on you. And at the same time, you depend on you. So make yourself matter. So I just tell them, wear yourself lightly, try different things. So I really believe in that. So anyway, that was fun. And now we come to a section where we call Ink Tree Seed. Arunabha, in a very selfish way, this section is all about, we always have these amazing conversations, and then that's it. We don't see each other till maybe there is another conference where I invite you. But we want to find a way to be in touch with you. So one of the things you talked about is women in sustainability. And we are actually launching a women fellowship program in the US. And one of the things we are always looking for, even in India, we have a fellowship program. We're always looking for strong women, and our focus is really on creating great leaders out of them. How do we personally coach them to be great leaders?
Right.
And I would love to see, how do you think you can help us identify them, or help us choose the right ones, or what is the right way to lead? Would love to
identify them in the US or here.
Yeah, we have 2 fellowships. We have an India fellowship, which is for everyone, men, women, etc. Whereas in US, it's only a women's leadership. In both of them, we are always looking for very strong leaders, especially women.
No, absolutely. Would love to talk more about this. Look, as I said, this is something very close to my heart, because things will not change unless you invest in people. And my wife jokes with me that I invest too much in people, and I make it the be all and end all of my existence of what is happening to the next person. But the point is, if we don't, and you can pick a fellowship and we can find the people, but it's also what you would do after the fellowship, and it's those inflection points in their careers when they want to give up, when they want to back out, when they want to say, no, I can't do it anymore, right? I would love to kind of brainstorm and talk more about, how do you anticipate those moments and then intervene, right?
Absolutely.
Because we will keep having, just like you asked about CW, its inflection points. We all have inflection points in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And this long durée way of thinking about that you are saying, and I have told tell my friends, I say, whether you want to do it or not, I mean, you will be strung up with wires and tubes, and people will make you live not to 90, you will be living to 100.
Yeah.
So, so you will, you can give up now, but you're only running away, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, would be very happy to find, locate,
Yeah.
identify, but also, and if women mentor women or women, I had women mentors,
Yeah.
in the early stages of my career. So if women mentor men, then
Yeah.
men will want to invest in women's leadership,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So
true.
we have to think about it that way as well. So
Yeah.
happy to support in any which way we can.
And I mean, I want to wrap up on something you said that's very important is to create a community of leaders. That's very important because, one thing we've seen in our fellowship is that it becomes a community and it's not just for that 1 year, for the, 3 years down the line, 10 years down the line, they're reaching out to each other and hanging out on each other's strengths. Somebody says, okay, oh, you're coming to New York, you can hang out in my couch or whatever it is. I think I really want to wrap up by saying that it's important for us to create a community of really strong thinkers and doers. And I think with the work that you're doing, you're creating it not just in sustainability, but in affecting the world in a larger way. So, really, thank you for your time, Arunabha. And it's this conversation is going to continue, and especially in how do we create a community of leaders across the globe. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lakshmi. This has been a great conversation. I really hope we can push through on some of these ideas and passions.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Namaste.